Monday, floors and chores. Tuesday, deep cleaning to give meaning. Wednesday, bath and kitchen. Thursday, dust we must. Friday, wash and dry day. Saturday, wildcard. Sunday, shop and chop. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm Jacob Shymanski with Ramya Amuthan and regular contributor Aamer Khan. How's it going, dudes?
Hey, going well.
Fantastic.
Looking forward to this review.
See, this is going to be an interesting one, but that obnoxious nag of a quote that I read off the top is from The Maid by Nina Prose. It was a New York Times #1 bestseller in 2022 and sold over 2 million copies. And friends, in the spirit of today's lovable main character, let's approach this review with ruthless efficiency and discipline. Here's our agenda for the next 30 minutes. 1. Synopsis and what to expect. 2. Addressing the elephant in the room. Why do Ramya and Aamer have beef with this book? 3. Redeeming qualities, if applicable. 4. Exploring the strange dichotomy between the Maid's objective lack of quality and the undeniable enjoyment so many people pull from it. 5. Analysis of its ending. And 6. Concluding thoughts from the 3 reviewers. Does that sound like a plan for all of you?
Yeah. Objective
Sure.
lack of quality will be the first part of the beef situation.
We'll get to that. Number 1 on the list is
sorry.
synopsis and knowing what to expect.
You got to go in order, Ramya.
Sorry, I'm not disciplined enough. Okay.
Otherwise, it's chaos. Okay, Ramya, it's all up to you. Can you give us an idea what this book is all about and what people can expect from it if you somehow haven't heard about it already?
Sure. All right, so let's talk about The Maid by Nita Prose. Molly Gray is not like everyone else. She struggles with social skills and misreads the intentions of others. Her gran used to interpret the world on behalf of her, codifying it into simple rules that Molly could live by. But since Gran died a few months ago, 25-year-old Molly has been navigating life's complexities all by herself. No matter, she throws herself with gusto into her work as a hotel maid. Her unique character, along with her obsessive love of cleaning and proper etiquette, make her an ideal fit for the job. She delights in donning her crisp uniform every morning, stocking her cart with miniature soaps and bottles, and returning guest rooms at the Regency Grand Hotel to a state of perfection. But Molly's life, her orderly life, is upended the day she enters the suite of the infamous and wealthy Charles Black, only to find it in a state of disarray and Mr. Black himself dead in his bed. Before she knows what's happening, Molly's unusual demeanor has the police targeting her as the main suspect. She quickly finds herself in a web of deception, one she has no idea how to untangle. Fortunately for Molly, friends she never knew she had unite with her in a search for clues to what really happened to Mr. Black. But will they be able to find the real killer before it's too late? A clue-like lock-room mystery and a heartwarming journey of the spirit, The Maid explores what it means to be the same as everyone else and yet entirely different, and reveals that all mysteries can be solved through the connection to the human heart. That is The Maid by Nita Prose.
Is about 9 hours long and it is available on Sila. I think it would be important to address the controversy around this book, and it is the first thing we want to touch on because it's every time you look at this book online in reviews and discussions, there's always talk about how this book made people feel, and a lot of people feel a little icky after reading this one. Why is that? Aamer, do you want to address that?
Sure. I think it's important to note there's a second book for this series as well that's available on Sila, but we're talking about the first one today. But in terms of the ickiness, I think for about 3/4 of the book, it's very much a tale of innocence, of a young woman trying to make it in the world, who's obviously on the spectrum or has social awkwardness at the very minimum, and it's a very positive foot forward type of book for the first 3/4. I mean, there's no sort of bad ickiness. You don't feel that she has a bad bone in her body, and you really see the world through her eyes, and it's quite rosy. And you see where she has missed certain cues from certain people, but it always seems that she has the best of intention at heart, and she's always doing the right thing. And I think towards the last quarter of the book, the reader starts to realize that this may not be the entire case.
Yeah, actually, everything gets solved in like the last fifth of the book, quarter of the book. My answer is exactly the same, right? The ick comes from this person who the whole book is written in the perspective of Molly, Molly the maid, and all these cliches around that. But there's just this kind of, why is she like this, and why are we hearing it this way? And that comes down to the whole like invisible disability slash assumption that she's on the autism spectrum slash, she's socially awkward, but people are still not necessarily aware or empathetic of that. And that is very much prevalent throughout the book. So she's just being completely taken advantage of because of the way she is, because of her atypical brain or behavior, like set of behaviors. She's very diligent and strict and by the rules, and she only processes in like black and white, right? And so she can't understand social cues and things like that, and it is very obvious that she's being taken advantage of because of those things. So that's the part of it, because we're so, we're talking disability all the time on shows and in our lives, and we have lived experience with disabilities. It's just very forefront of the conversations. That's the way that I feel about
Yeah, and I think towards the end of the book also, it becomes more than just people sort of pulling her in different directions.
Yes.
And trying to take advantage of her. They start to cross lines, right? Especially with Rodney, and basically trying to frame her and doing this. I mean, like, there's one thing to sort of convince her to help you to do stuff, and then it's another to like actually frame her for like murder or something else. And you see that on sort of all fronts, and it's also on her own character side too, right? Towards the end of the book, you realize, oh, she took this ring and pawned it in, and you're like, whoa, that's totally out of her character. And the author sort of tries to explain it away with like finders keepers, but I don't know. To me, that didn't ring true to use the phrase.
Yeah.
If you want to be blunt about it, you can just say that this is a book where an autistic girl gets manipulated by slimy jerks and drug dealers.
Yes.
And like, is that not just uncomfortable? Murder. Yes, and framed of murder, which is pretty serious. But she kind of unintentionally incriminates herself, and through sheer luck, the actual criminals are in a position to frame her.
Yep. And then not just that, the extension of that perspective is, and it takes the kindness and goodness of others, like, who are like, oh no, Molly, you don't deserve this. You're a good person, to come to her defense and, pull her out of the situation altogether. She didn't necessarily do that all on her own until the very end. Then you can kind of say, okay, she had
exactly, and that's where we have an issue
herself.
with the book.
But yeah, like, she plays a complete victim.
Books are not reality, and if it was reality,
she's
probably
kind
read
of
as a very boring book. But there's things that are sort of beyond the character of all the characters that sort of happen towards the last fifth or quarter of the book, which
from the room, and that just seems so out of character. But it's funny because it's like the only moment where she really takes action on her own accord.
Yeah. So that's did you have anything specific, Jacob, around anything that we've already said on this?
I think you and Aamer are more critical of that ick factor that seems to be so prevalent amongst among the discussion around this book. If there's one thing I can relate to a little bit, is this is a non-neurodivergent author writing a neurodivergent character that's kind of specifically meant to be like quirky and fun, and it makes people feel a little gross that an invisible disability is kind of being played for laughs. Do you think that's fair, Aamer?
I don't know. I mean, I think the book is designed to be entertaining, and I think
and it's funny too,
and funny, and I mean, I wouldn't take it too seriously in terms of being critical to the author that they're neurodivergent and have wrote a neurodivergent book. I mean, we see other authors writing characters which are on the spectrum and with different disabilities, and I personally don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, if you look at it with a really close lens, you can sort of start picking apart Molly's sort of way of looking at things. Like, how come she can understand a bad egg versus a good egg, but any other sort of analogy is lost to her? And it's like, well, analogies are very similar to themselves, so how come she's getting one and not the other? And all sorts of other nuances that you can sort of try to pick apart. But part of what makes this book really fun and interesting and entertaining is the language and the type of language that it's written in. I mean, even one of the characters comments that she has a particular way of speaking, like she's from like the 50s in the movie star or whatever. And I think that's what gives this book a lot of its charm too, right? I mean, for other people, I won't mention names, but the word delightful might be somewhat of an ick factor and things like that. But for others, it might be.
The word delightful is really overused in this book for some reason, and Molly carries the book here. Her character is, while it's not necessarily the most like there is this type of archetype that's been used in the past before, but I did find myself really liking Molly as a character. This like mid-20s something girl that's like very ladylike, like she was supposed to be back in the 50s, like impossibly clean, like obnoxiously clean and disciplined, and just likes things to be where they are. Like in the synopsis that you read, Ramya, I thought it was pretty telling that when it says that she walks into the room with the body of Charles Black, it says she discovers the room in disarray.
Yeah.
Oh, and also there's a corpse on the bed.
Yeah. Dead in his bed.
Dead in his bed. That's been used many times over.
Yeah.
It's sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, because I wanted to give a comparison of this book to another book.
There's a scene where Molly goes on a date/meeting with Rodney, one of the main, I guess you can call him villains in this book. They go to Olive Garden, and he's clearly trying to get her to do something that would incriminate her, and she's completely oblivious. And so you get this chapter from her point of view where she's getting manipulated, but she doesn't realize it, but it's painfully obvious to us, the listeners. And I found that chapter simultaneously super entertaining while also being a little icky, but icky in a good way, in a way that's like, I thought it was actually well written. Did you guys
Yeah, there were a few scenes like that, actually. I would agree that the Olive Garden scene was like, ugh, but it's because you were on her side, right? There were times when you would unconsciously or not come to Molly's defense and be like, come on guys, like, be nicer, or I can't believe you would do this to her. And that's what it was. It was like, in the support of Molly, some of these scenes were like, as you said, icky or gross, but felt real, like felt like an actual investment into the book. And that was one of those scenes for sure.
There's a lot.
The other one was when she was getting interrogated by the detective the first time around. She's like, how dare you accuse my girl, Molly?
And how dare you give her a styrofoam cup?
I was just so abashed. See, I like this book. The more I'm talking about it now, the more I realize I like it. Like, I feel like I shouldn't like it for all the reasons that we listed earlier about why this book is giving people the ick. But I enjoyed it. Like, from page to page, I enjoyed it, which doesn't seem to be the case for you, Ramya. I feel like you haven't fully elaborated on why you didn't like this.
Honestly, it's not just, okay, like, obviously the biggest factor I've already talked about, right? The portrayal of Molly as a neurodiverse person, and being victimized really practically because of her disability. The second thing is, I just didn't think it was so well written. I thought it was very, very, very cliched on how we like portrayal of people with neurodiversity, right? Neurodivergent people. And then in general, I thought the plot line was extremely predictable up until the end. There were some interesting plot twists very, very much near the end, but most of it was just like, the characters were predictable, they were stereotypical, and the plot, the way that it progressed, and when we would go from suspect to suspect, you're like, yeah, this is obviously what's about to happen. And it felt very light, and I've talked about this as a general gripe in the past of different kinds of books, regardless of genre, where if it doesn't feel deep enough, then I don't particularly enjoy it because I'm still waiting for it to get deeper. And this was one of those books where I felt
This is
like
one of
as
those
a mystery.
cases where you would be better served like doing your research before you read it, knowing what you're getting yourself into. That
Essentially.
said, you kind of
Yeah,
had to read this one because we decided to read it on this show.
Yeah. And
Don't have
it's
much
a
of a choice.
cozy mystery, right? Compared to
yeah,
something like,
definitely.
Girl on the Train or whatever. It's much cozier.
It's much cozier. I think it's designed to be a lot lighter. I mean, you have
Absolutely.
like all the character names from Molly the Maid. I mean, that's one. My personal favorite, Chernobyl, for her boss.
Right.
It's
Right.
hilarious. And like as I said earlier, if you take a closer look at it, I mean, the novel sort of falls apart in terms of reality, right? I mean, as I alluded to earlier, I mean, Preston seems to be her grandfather, but at the same time, after her grandmother passes away, he doesn't really look in on her except like saying hello to her at the door, which doesn't really count in my book.
Sure. And making sure she has a
Um,
job, I guess?
and especially since he knows she's neurodivergent, right? I mean, he's not knowing that fact. And then
Right.
the
That
whole
makes no
concept
sense
of
at all. Now that I'm thinking about it, you're so right. Why isn't this old man that's apparently her grandfather like involving himself more in the life of this girl that doesn't have parents or now a
Uh-huh.
doesn't have
grandmother?
anybody. That
What
doesn't
is
have
wrong with this
literally
guy?
anybody. And then he's like giving subtle hints to somebody who's obviously not going to get them that Rodney's a bad egg. And it's like, no, you need to do a bit more than that, especially when you see her going off on a date with this guy. Um, and
True. Maybe. Okay.
and like, and even more important is the concept of how her grandmother died, right? I mean, we see from Molly's own accounts and from Preston's own accounts that Preston helped him make a decision about his wife in terms of ending her life towards the end. So why wasn't this guy doing the deed for the grandmother? Why did it fall on Molly's
Spoiler
shoulder?
alert.
So, well, we've been spoiling since the
Spoiler.
beginning
This
of
whole
this book.
series
Alert.
this whole review
Yeah.
is a spoiler. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But I mean, like that is the ultimate one, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna let the granddaughter do this thing, even though I know this person is sick and she helped me out with my wife, but I think I'll just turn a blind eye toward it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, not too happy. And again, we were talking about when lines are crossed and stuff. I mean, the only way Preston and his daughter Charlotte come to her rescue is when she's literally framed up for murder. I mean, like, is that the
Yep.
bar for going and helping
That's
the
what it
girl?
took.
Like,
That's what it took, eh?
come on.
Yeah.
And then other reality pieces of Charlotte putting up what, $800,000 for her bail. I mean,
That's right. Like there was no
that's a lot.
dude. This girl just walked in. Charlotte just walked into the situation
Her
and was
cop
like,
shop.
"I'm rich. I'm a hot shot, and I've got you on an $800,000 bail." And everyone, including the judge, was like, "Oh, you got friends in big places." None of us
Mm.
knew that. It just felt like you just tossed it in. Right? There was a lot of kind of thoughtless seems very harsh, but there was a lot of that kind
Yeah,
of just
yeah. And it goes to the lightness,
fitting
I
it.
think, of the book too. I mean, like
Yeah.
they could have used any number besides 800,000, something reasonable, and it would have been fine. But the way she sort of strolls in is like, oh yeah, just put $800,000 on my Amex and I'm good. Like it's just like, no, it doesn't really work that way.
It's weird that this book definitely has that characterization of a cozy read, like a cozy mystery, but then at the same time, it's at odds with the fact that there's this uncomfortable situation of her being manipulated as a
Yes.
neurodivergent person. It's like that's not
Absolutely.
something you would see in a cozy read. So there's kind of like a clash of tone in those two regards.
Yeah.
And
It
although
is
most-
diverse for a cozy read.
it is diverse, and I think for a lot of the scenes, even though we're seeing things through Molly's eyes, we can see the manipulation happening. But there are still scenes which I'm still curious about, and like what was going on. I mean, like they had that meeting at the hotel with Mr. Preston basically alluding to the fact that illegal things are going on in the hotel. I mean, like what was the point of that speech? I mean, I could see it happening, but were they trying to get Molly to admit something, or was that a warning to
I
Rodney to stop? Like, what on earth was going on?
I had a bigger question mark, which was what's the dishwasher's name?
Manuel.
Manuel. Yeah,
yeah.
Juan Manuel. Did anybody else have a problem with him being kind of innocent in the end? Like there was a whole part of the book where I thought, why would he be fully innocent. Like I was super cynical of what was going on with him. I understood what they were portraying, which is that he was being manipulated just as much as Molly, but in a different sense. But there was a
I think more
fraction of the
so.
book. Yeah, more so, obviously. Yeah,
More
and
so.
physically abused and such. But there was a whole part where I was just like, no way. This is going to be debunked at some point.
I don't understand. You had beef that he wasn't, that he turned out to be innocent, or you didn't believe
I thought
that he
it
was
was
innocent. It was set up
I
badly.
thought it was
Like,
too
what's your
simple
issue?
of a plot. I was
I mean,
like, really? Oh, okay. There's
I think
nothing
they
is-
tried
more
to
to it.
they tried to nuance it with Rodney sort of being the middleman to a lawyer that was also corrupt, and I think that's where the
That
novel
was the
sort of almost.
nuance.
Well, I mean, I think it was just going too far in too many directions, right? It wasn't just that he was being abused by Rodney. It was that he had given his paperwork to this
Yeah.
fake lawyer who basically took his stuff, and now he can't do anything. So
Essentially,
putting
like
him
as
in a
soon as
vulnerable
Manuel
spot,
talked, we were to believe that he was, had nothing to
innocent.
do with it, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
just cooperative. Done.
It's kind of annoying that there were two characters in this book that were just helpless, innocent victims.
Yes.
I think I have room
Yeah.
for one character like that in a
Yeah.
book, but I can't have both Molly and Juan Manuel at the
Yep.
same time. It
That's
just
And
what it
then
was.
it
spoiler
just seems
alert
exhausting.
at the end where they magically end up together. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
All
yeah,
it
that
just
wasn't built
worked
up at
out.
all.
I'm socially awkward, but now I have a live-in boyfriend. What?
And also, Juan Manuel just, happens to love her exactly the way she is with all her quirks. It happily ever after kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cookie
I wanna
cutter.
move-
It's very cookie cutter. All
Yeah,
right, yes,
I,
move on to
I
something
don't
else.
strictly have an issue with that because the next thing on our agenda is redeeming qualities if applicable, and I think
Okay.
it is applicable in some sense.
It is.
Guys, I enjoyed this book despite everything we just said because it's schlocky, it's kind of trash, but it's so entertaining, and I like being entertained. Like, I don't care if these characters are kind of one-dimensional. It's still fun, and there was funny dialogue that made me laugh. I liked it in a not very deep level, just kind of like how this book is not very deep. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't
don't think so.
Not at
I
all.
think
No.
I think from my perspective, there was no point in this book where I was like, I'm going to put this down and not continue reading. I mean, like, that never happened with this book.
Me
I wanted
neither.
to continue reading. I wanted to see where it went. There were places which I didn't particularly appreciate it was going, but there was no point where I was like, no, this is not for me, and I'm going to put this down.
Ramya.
And I think there were some nuances, if I can use that word now, Ramya,
Sure.
in the book which I thought were interesting, like the Serenity Pillow. There's certain sort of touches and adornments in the book which are interesting and thought provoking, and she sprinkles enough of them in there that they're not their own thing, but they add to the overall storyline.
Mm-hmm. I will say, yeah, I was a fan of descriptions in the cleaning and the organizational neat freak side of Molly.
You didn't appreciate the Olive Garden ones? I thought you would have enjoyed.
Yeah, those ones good too. Yeah, those ones are good in the food. But just the way that she, like, every time something was tidy, untidy, clean, or unclean, she would go into detail and depth of description, and I loved it. I loved those parts of the book more than anything else that you guys have mentioned. Were just like the descriptions of her cart, her pressed uniform. I remember when she saw herself in the her mugshot on TV, and she remembered back to her neatly pressed uniform on the first day of work. I was like, yes, like there's a part of me that finds this stuff very relatable, just like fingerprints on things that she notices, or like, how dare you underestimate how I can clean this up, that kind of thing. And I loved that. I loved that about her.
Guys, I mentioned it in the intro that this was a #1 New York Times bestseller in 2022, and it sold over 2 million copies. Why do you think it was this popular? Like, what's your appeal? Why do you think this book has so much appeal?
I think she's an endearing character, right? I mean, I think,
Yes,
like Ramya said earlier, you want to get behind her. You're cheering for her. You're rooting for her. I think a lot of people enjoyed the twist and the twist aspect of the end, as well as the unexpectedness of where the novel goes in the last like 4 or 5 chapters. I personally didn't care for it, and I don't think Ramya did either. But I think a lot of people really enjoy that unexpected aspect. I know, Dan Brown and a couple of other authors really have this sort of habit of doing a 3/4 novel and then taking in a completely different direction, or dropping something like an anvil on the reader, which again, I don't appreciate, but a lot of other people do enjoy, especially on this sort of current time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I found it pretty mediocre, to be honest, but I think the reason why everybody loves this book is the same reason why people love watching Hallmark. Like, it's cozy,
Yeah.
it's predictable, you know what you're getting. After the synopsis, you know if you're going to pick this book up or not, right? But I did enjoy, like, her character, Molly's character, had the complexities. If you were looking for them, you could find the complexities to her, the depth to her. You couldn't with literally anybody else in this book, though. And then near the end, there were reasons to have stuck around. And honestly, I'm telling you, I would not have stuck around till the end if you guys weren't reviewing this on. Like if we weren't reviewing it together, and if Jacob didn't say read it till the last page, because there were things that jumped out at you right at the end that added to the depth of Molly's character. So again, going back to that, for me, but it's understandable though. Regardless of my enjoyment of the book or level of enjoyment, I very much could understand why people love this book.
And to pull on that thread, I mean, I mentioned earlier that there's a second part to this book, but after reading this book, I was like, there is no way there's a part 2 for this book. I mean, I felt very much
possibly be.
I very much thought this would be a standalone book, and that would be the end of Molly the Maid. But there is a second one, and I haven't
somebody
even
read the
started it.
synopsis for that? No, okay.
No,
you haven't started it.
Yeah, I have no clue what it's about.
How could there I don't know what.
And I don't care to read it, to be honest.
I'm with you on that, Jacob. I'm sort of curious to see what they could possibly write about her, but at the same time, there's like almost a 0% curiosity of me wanting to know more about these characters.
I doubt it. I feel like you're going to read it, Aamer. You're going to pick it up.
Am I?
You did this with the Ninja series.
I would read it if the synopsis was about Giselle. I'd be like, hey, okay, yeah, I can.
Oh, I did like Giselle.
Character.
I did like her.
And I think that's another character that sort of falls out of the sky in this book, and you immediately like the character because again, it's another sort of damsel in distress type of character who's trying to get out, and you see how she's trying to do that, and she's one of these like, I don't want to get in trouble, but I don't want to get anybody else in trouble as well. So she seems to be a cut above the Rodneys of the world, but not, and sort of in line with the Prestons of the world, but at the same time, she is looking out for herself too. So,
I mean, yes, but I found her, like Giselle, to be the second most complex character in this book, and not because of the stereotypical like she married rich and no boohoo and he cheats on her, that kind of stuff. Yeah, femme fatale, but more so that she found solace in Molly, right? She found home, and there were a lot of intimate moments between the two of these characters. It was a good
relationship, yeah.
Yes, and for real, like that part of it felt very, very genuine in terms.
By
of
the way,
writing.
Another sub mystery which was never solved was how does she know where she lives?
Oh, Rodney told her, obviously.
How does he know where she lives?
I don't know.
Because Rodney works at the same hotel, and they probably have a contact sheet. Everybody has access to. They work at the same place. You can figure it out.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the ending real quick? Because there's a lot of talk about doing the right thing, and then that's the setup for Molly in a flashback suffocating her grandma with a pillow to death. And so the maid is kind of has a double meaning, medical assistance in dying, and I didn't see that coming. And
I don't think anybody did.
Nobody did. It was kind of out of left field, but also like it was set up in a way that I can say, okay, that's kind of believable. But then I think, wow, this Molly character is kind of all over the place. That this like innocent, unsuspecting person is capable of being like an accessory to a murder, and then an actual murderer herself.
And it's so weird that everything sort of comes full circle and sort of runs parallel and sort of scrambles your brain, right? Because we come to also know that Mr. Dead in the Bed was also suffocated. Charles Black was also suffocated, just like her grandmother was. And she's involved, like you said, in 2 murders now. And it's like, what is, does she just have this MO of being around people who are suffocated to death? Like, what is...
I loved that, by the way. I loved that kind of recurring foreshadowing of Molly's fainting spells, and then that playing a big role at the end there. That was nice. Good on the author. What was your question, Jacob? Was the ending good?
Yeah, just
I
an
liked it. I liked the
analysis,
plot
yeah.
twist. Me, who
I-
was waiting around for something to happen in this book, anything out of left field,
See, Rams,
please.
I feel like you're turning around on this book. There's a lot of good qualities in it.
No.
Like, it was kind of concise all the way through. Like there was kind of a plan, and you could
There was
tell.
so much alliteration too. I'm surprised you didn't enjoy like Ben's friends and all these.
Oh, I
like,
laughed out loud. I agree with
Yeah,
Jacob. There were
those-
so many like actual funny moments, like ridiculously funny. You know,
Yeah, it was just a
like
bit
as in this is
all over the
ridiculous. I
place.
can't believe I'm laughing. Like dad jokes.
Yeah. I mean, even her coworkers, right? I'm glad you found the snake in the grass, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, it's not a difficult one to figure out. I don't know.
Yeah, Molly. It's kind of funny that she's just completely desensitized to suffocating people with pillows. She just saw.
She
just
wasn't
saw it happen to Mr. Bell.
desensitized. Come
No,
on.
I know.
He's not doing that part justice. You have to read the book in order to get the actual feel.
Yeah, I'm sorry for spoiling it for everyone. Who
She was
hasn't read the book,
devastated.
but yeah,
She did not want to kill her grandmother, guys.
She didn't do it with glee. Okay, yeah, you're right. That's an important detail. But
And we
And then-
haven't
and then
actually
she had-
spoiled the most proper part of this book. There is
that's
a
true. You
complete
still don't know
plot
who the
twist.
killer is.
Yeah, you
And-
don't know.
And the most intelligent part of her sort of being, and I use that term in terms of her being, is that she was able to tell the difference in that moment that justice can't be solved by the legal system alone, right?
Yep.
And you see sort of hints of
Facts,
that
Molly.
throughout
Yeah.
the book. You see that she can make that distinction in terms of how she's helping Rodney, how she's helping Manuel. I mean, it's all outside of the law, but her black and white doesn't apply to there. And when we get to this particular scene and the ending of what actually happened, I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that she is smarter than people give her credit for in terms of looking at the gray areas of black and white.
Yeah, you got to take justice into your own hands. Molly Gray's basically the Batman. And I think that's concluding thoughts.
And it's Molly Gray.
Yeah. Did we follow your discipline
zone.
agenda?
Well enough,
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay, thanks.
We did it in spirit. That doesn't mean we did it to the T.
Mm.
Guys, thank you so much. This is a fun review.
Molly would not approve,
Absolutely.
but yeah, thanks.
That was regular contributor to AMI Audiobook Review, Aamer Khan, and AMI's Ramya Amuthan. It's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. You can find a repeat of AMI Audiobook Review as part of AMI Today on AMI Audio every 6 hours. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms, and that includes YouTube. Thanks for joining us. I was your host, Jacob Shymanski. Have a good one.